Hello and welcome to CIO News, Voice of CIO series. I'm Khushbu Soni, your host for the broadcast and a contributing editor at CIO News, where we write about business strategy and boardroom issues for technology leaders. This is a recorded session and will be available on our website, which is cionews.co.in, and our CIO News LinkedIn page. Let me dive in introducing my guest for today. He's David Benjamin, the Chief Information Officer at Millennium Services Group Limited. David has been leading digital transformation for Millennium Services. David has been a business and a technology visionary with more than 20 years of experience in planning digital strategy to achieve business outcomes. Prior to Millennium Services Group, David has worked for 10 years for almost 10 years for National Australia Bank. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Khushbu, for the warm welcome and glad to be here.
It's the pleasure's all mine, David. David, so if you can share a quick brief about Millennium Services Group. We've all heard about the brand, but if you can give quick insight, that would be great.
Sure, no problem. So Millennium Services Group is a publicly listed company on the Australian Stock Exchange and predominantly provides two types of services to its clients, namely cleaning and security. And the environment in which those services are provided are in large settings such as large shopping centres, corporate offices, anything where there's a large footprint that needs to be cleaned and also secured. The cleaning services are provided across Australia and New Zealand, so if you like an international service offering, along with the security services also operating in Australia and New Zealand. We operate in all states of Australia and on the North and South Island of New Zealand. And all of those services are provided by around 5,000 employees. And at last count, because it changes on a month-by-month basis, approximately 700 distinct sites where our staff work. So most of our staff are working at a client site, which would typically, for example, be a shopping centre, and about 400 staff of the 5,000 are office-based in various offices. So a more typical scenario, I guess, for accessing an IT system. The challenge that I found when joining Millennium 2.5 years ago was getting the technology and the access to the remainder of those 5,000 based at all of the different sites across the two countries.
David, what is the vision of Millennium in terms of digital transformation, and what are the top few technologies you see that can help achieve that vision?
Yeah. So when I first joined Millennium, it was very heavily process-based, but most of those processes were still manual and in a large number of cases, paper-based. So this was an opportunity. The role was a newly created role when I joined, and the company had decided to place more emphasis on technology and move this function out of the finance team and made it independent, reporting directly into the CEO. There's probably a number of points I'd highlight in terms of our vision from a digital transformation perspective. The first is getting greater visibility of the workforce. As you can imagine, our labour costs are one of our largest costs in running the business. With over 4,000 to 5,000 employees, that's a substantial amount of our overhead. So some of that transformation was firstly to digitise the timesheets, so moving away from paper, which obviously caused a lot of, it's open to error, fraud, not to mention just a lot of data entry, manual data entry for our payroll team. So we are well underway now. We're, I would say, about 80% through that project. We're using a cloud-based application. All of those employees can now clock on to their shifts, either through a dedicated time clock mounted to the wall or through a smartphone with an app on their phone. And the application itself uses a couple of features that we needed. One, we needed to verify the identity of the cleaner. And so facial recognition was very important. So facial recognition is used to verify the identity of the cleaner or security guard. And the other part of that too was with the GPS facility, or geofencing as we call it, to ensure that the cleaner is clocking on within a certain radius of where we would expect them to be cleaning, logging on to. So timesheets was one thing. The other important factor in this industry is monitoring where the staff are within the shopping centre or office building. And that's more important from a public liability insurance perspective, in that, especially in public areas, the public do on occasion might trip or fall over, which invariably results in litigation. And the technology helps support Millennium's position in terms of defending any litigation or legal matters, whereby in the contracts we have with our clients, we guarantee that a cleaner will rotate or pass a particular point in a certain time frame. And so the technology allows us to track our staff and meet that requirement. The other thing as part of our digital transformation is we want to make it easier for our staff to do their jobs. And a good example of that is we also run site audits for our clients, and that typically involves a walk around of the site, normally with the client, identifying areas perhaps that need either repair or maintenance, possibly extra cleaning. And that's all recorded in a digital format, which allows distribution to the client as well as our internal staff almost immediately. More importantly, we get very good reporting out of that tool as well. So that helps our staff run those site audits more efficiently and get the information to the client. And the third point I'd like to make is, and this is, I guess, the most important part as an outcome of the first two I've outlined, is we want to give our clients better information, better reporting, so that they are able to see the work that's being done, a more transparent approach. And then they also get a sense of confidence that we are meeting all the requirements of the contract as a supplier of either their cleaning or security services.
Got it. Awesome. And David, since last year, I mean, while we were all in these pandemic, the whole 2020 pandemic that we were in, how did Millennium responded to the situation?
Yeah, it was certainly a challenging time, not just for Millennium, but for our clients, for everyone we were dealing with. Just prior to the first lockdown in Melbourne, which was around March of 2020, we were in the process of migrating our older systems to the Microsoft 365 platform. And we had to make a decision. We knew that we were going into a lockdown, but we had a short period of time. So we decided to go ahead with the migration and then run the remainder of that project from home effectively. And that was, in hindsight, a great decision because it got our data onto a stable platform. More importantly, it allowed our teams to collaborate in a lockdown setting. Now, fortunately for most of Australia, that lockdown only lasted for around 6 weeks. Unfortunately for those of us in Melbourne, which is where our head office is, it lasted much longer, for around 180 days. But it's interesting to watch the adoption of technology in that situation and how people change quite quickly. And now for most people, it is, not much of a challenge or not uncommon now just to automatically have video conferencing for a meeting and not necessarily expect people to be physically in the office. So it's certainly created a different way of working. For the company in general, though, the pandemic resulted in increased business for a company like Millennium. As you can imagine, the demand for cleaning increased significantly. Over and above our core contracts, it was now more requests for deep cleaning of either retail premises or situations where an infection had occurred and then the client wanted that area cleaned thoroughly. So that created a lot more work. And then also on the security side of things, around Australia, testing centres or pop-up testing centres became quite prevalent. And in Victoria, where Melbourne is in the south, we won a contract with the government to provide security for all of the pop-up testing centres. And I remember at the peak in Melbourne, there were around 40 of those where they needed to be secured 24 hours, 7 days a week. So fortunately for us, and luckily, our IT systems migrating to that Microsoft cloud enabled us to get those connections up and running quite quickly, and to a workforce that was, even more disparate and spread across the country. So I suppose the summary of that is we were fortunate in that the technology could scale with this, immediate peak in business or spike in business. And it's worked really, really well. So for us, unlike a lot of other businesses who I know some have struggled, but for a company like ours, it actually increased the work.
Good to hear that. That there have been positives. Good to hear. Also, I wanted to understand, get your perspective, David, as to what percentage of work you think will remain digital in 2021 and going forward now.
Yeah, so at the moment we're quite early on our journey. Obviously, by mid 2021, we'll have finished the rollout and implementation of the digital timesheets. So that effectively will mean we are processing around 4,000 timesheets every fortnight through a digital platform, and that digital platform also interprets on how to pay. So it applies an award, which is an enterprise type award, to the employees and can pay automatically. So what that does, it effectively means once the timesheet is approved, that information goes straight into our payroll system, which then enables automatic payment through the bank. So that's progressing quite quickly. The other major project we're working on this year for, once again, completion in 21 is a new HR or human resource information system. Millennium, I'll share the background of Millennium. It publicly listed in 2016, so about 5 years ago. And it was the culmination of 4 or 5 independent companies coming together to form one larger company. And it's just part of the growing pain of a company as it gets bigger. Initially had no HR system or centralized records. These records were generally each office. So the new HR system will obviously give us, once again, a cloud-based solution where all that information can be stored. But we're also hoping to automate the onboarding process. Once again, eliminating paper so that a cleaner or a guard, once successful at an interview, can actually onboard themselves, fill out all the necessary forms in Australia or New Zealand, and get themselves onboarded and active automatically through, once again, a digital platform. So I'd say, you know, at the moment with the timesheets, we're probably 30% digital. I'd say by the end of 21, we'll be more at 50%, and we'll continue that into the following year as well. So for me as the CIO, it's about automating as much as we can, eliminating, I guess, manual process, and wherever we can automate that, for, you know, comes out as obviously more efficient, hopefully more economical, which means we are more competitive when we're tendering for new business.
Awesome, David. Great. David, any advice or any best practices that you would want to give to other fellow CIOs within the community? Certain do's and don'ts that they could look at.
Yeah, both of the points that I'll talk about now are not technical, but for me that's something that I've learned over the years. So the first point I'd make is, as a CIO, it's always important to spend time with the business that you're working with. And from my perspective, very important to listen and keep listening and understand before jumping into solution mode. It's, you know, very easy, as for a lot of us as technologists, to quite quickly make assumptions and start making recommendations around a technology or a tool. My experience would suggest always seek to understand and listen, and then work with the business to form a new solution. The other important part too is, once a new solution is identified and as it's being implemented, it's important that there is an underlying business process that supports the technology. And I say that because no matter what the technology is, or the tool or the application that you might be considering, it will never solve a business problem on its own. The business must have a supporting process to enable the success of that application or tool. So I guess, you know, from my experience, don't get caught in the trap that a new tool will solve people problems, for example, or a business process that's not working well. The technology will only ever support a business and enhance it, but it can't be successful in its own right. So for me, they're my two guiding principles whenever I'm starting any new, either new project or a new job for that matter, is getting in and understanding that business to be able to make better recommendations and decisions.
Absolutely, absolutely. This was great, David. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, your best practices, all of us through Voice of CIO series. It was a pleasure to host you. Thank you once again.
Thanks, Khushbu. It's my pleasure.